Hello and welcome to Pathways, where you were invited to join me for a visit with leaders in personal development and cultural evolution. This is your host, Paul O'Brien. These days, we could all use more tools to increase our self-knowledge, both mentally and physically, as our resilience is challenged by external circumstances, especially during this pandemic. By working with the chakras, we can open ourselves to the potential for deep soul growth and transformation, according to our author guest. Our guest today is Glen Park, author of the new book, Chakra Healing Therapy, Awaken Spiritual Energies and Heal Emotional Wounds. Glen is a healer, teacher, writer, workshop leader, and trainer in the Alexander Technique and Chakra Healing Therapy. She has been practicing these two healing modalities for over 30 years. Before that, she studied philosophy at Southampton University and then worked in the professional theater as an actress and playwright for 10 years. Hello, Glen, and welcome to the Pathway Show.
Thank you. Hello, and it's very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, let's start by asking, who is your book written for?
Okay, well, the book came out of lots of requests to put my knowledge into a book, and this was particularly from Alexander teachers who I was training in this work, but also from clients. Everybody really wanted something that they could, really refer to with the work. So it's for people who are therapists. Both I've worked with psychotherapists, I've worked with Alexander teachers, training them in this chakra work. So it's for therapists of all kinds, particularly body practitioners who work with their hands. But it's also for anyone who's really interested in looking at their own self-development and finding ways of understanding themselves better. I find the chakras are such a good map of understanding the self and helping to live with all the complicated bits of us.
Yeah, I've known about the chakras for a long time, since the 70s, even before that.
Yeah.
This book is like an encyclopedia of the 7 chakras. Actually, you've got the hands and the feet chakras too, but I found it fascinating, and it's got beautiful art, color plates of the different ways of visualizing the chakras, the different ways they've been presented throughout history. Why don't we explain for our audience, though, what is a chakra?
Okay, well, the chakras come from the Hindu spiritual tradition that goes back to 3000 BCE, so a very ancient wisdom tradition. And it was part of their yoga tradition. Yoga means to yoke the earthbound self to the spiritual self. And so we do a lot of yoga in this country, but there was more than just the kind of exercises we do now. They would meditate, they would do lots of spiritual practices, and all that was called yoga. All this wisdom came to the West in about the turn of the 20th century. And some of the people who wrote about the chakras then were people like Alice Bailey, Rudolf Steiner, Carl Jung. So it was a very interesting area. So what's a chakra? That's the background, that's the history. They called them divine energies of consciousness, the Hindu scriptures. And they are energy centers that are located in the spine and in the head that bring together all the different aspects of our being. They bring together the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual sides of our being. Mm-hmm. That's what, and everything is energy. They're energy centers, and they see the matter, physical body as energy, the mind as energy. It all sort of comes together in the chakras.
Right. And would you say they correlate with, obviously they correlate with levels of consciousness from a psychological point of view, or from a spiritual point of view? So that's what you get into in the book, is all the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual aspects of the chakras. It was a very comprehensive treatment of chakras in this book. How did you become interested in chakras?
Well, it was It was an unusual situation. I was working in the theatre, and I actually was suffering from burnout. I was exhausted, and I realized I had to stop. And that was the point at which I was going to start training as an Alexander Technique teacher. And I was lucky enough to get an Arts Council grant to study women's theatre in the United States. And so it was when I was over on that 4-month trip that I was encouraged by a friend of a friend to have a psychic reading. And this psychic said to me, well, the reason you're burnt out is that you're very, very psychically open and you don't know how to manage and look after your psychic mechanism. So as a result of that, I didn't quite believe it at first, but it proved correct. And so I started training in England in psychic development and learnt about the chakras then. And then at a later stage, returned to the United States and did some more training in the United States, learning about working with the chakras.
And how did you discover that there might be an intersection between your Alexander Technique work and chakra work?
Right. Well, that was, I loved teaching the Alexander Technique, which is working with the body to create movement that's better for you. And you work with hands, you're like a healer and a teacher in the Alexander Technique. But then occasionally I'd have people coming to work with me who were having very strong emotional reactions to the work. And I realized I couldn't just work at a physical level of saying, this is the way to sit, this is the way to stand, walk, etc. That I had to look at what was, sometimes someone would cry, sometimes there would be a memory released of some sort of trauma when I was releasing the muscles with my hands and so on. So I thought I've got to be able to work at a psychological level as much as at a physical level with people when this happens. And so I'd already trained at a psychic level of reading the chakras, being able to tell what was happening to some extent as I worked with my hands. So I started to tell clients that if they wanted me to, I would work with the chakras, and I began introducing it into my work. Sometimes then people started to come just for the chakra work. Some people would want both the Alexander work and the chakra work. Some people just wanted the Alexander work. So yes.
Why is it helpful to understand? What did you discover about why it's helpful to understand ourselves in terms of chakras? How did that help you heal people? How did it help people heal themselves?
Well, for example, I might find that I had a hand on somebody's abdomen and it just felt very numb, very sort of dead and low energy. And that chakra is the inner child. It's the second chakra, it's the sacral chakra. In the base chakra links to our earliest stage of life, in the womb, birth, first year or two of life, and then the sacral chakra links to childhood. And the motivation for childhood is to be happy, basically, to seek sensual pleasures, all that lovely sensual curiosity that young children have, and also to be a happy, contented member of a family. These are the kind of needs of the second chakra. So I could, when there was this kind of no energy flowing in that area, I kind of said, what was happening? What was your childhood like? How would you say you had a happy childhood, or was it difficult? And I would just start a conversation around that and then describe what the second chakra was about. And then if we found something that made sense to the client, I could give suggestions. I mean, just very simple suggestions with the second chakra of thinking of sensual pleasures. I put all these suggestions in the book, and thinking of your favorite tastes, your favorite movements, the way you like to touch and be touched, your favorite sounds and sights, just sensual stimulation usually brings a lot of energy into that sacral chakra. It's a very simple, pleasure-oriented chakra of the young child.
seems like a lot of people in our puritanical culture are conflicted on the second chakra level, in the sense that, it's not, they feel guilty if they focus on their own pleasure or their own sensual satisfaction.
Yes, it's really sad, because what we do is when children get to adolescence and young adulthood, they're kind of told, when I was a child, I played with childish things, and then you leave them behind. You leave childhood behind, and you focus on being this successful adult. And actually, that's the way to end up feeling very depressed a few years further down the line, because we need to keep our inner child on board, having fun, having pleasure, having good friendships, having good relationships, feeling that they belong in some way to a group of family or friends. So the third chakra, the solar plexus chakra, is about building self-esteem, self-respect. Not, it's delayed gratification. We don't go around having pleasure. We study for exams. We do all these things, and that needs to be in balance with the inner child of the second chakra.
Now, let's say that, well, it's kind of like Maslow's triangle, right? There's this foundation,
Absolutely.
the base, and there's this evolution of need fulfillment that, and so you're pointing out that a lot of people, and I think myself included, have kind of, in making a transition from second chakra consciousness, the inner child, the joyful, innocent child within, to the burgeoning adult, learning to get along in the world, learning to be successful, learning to develop a strong sense of self, learning to develop a strong ego. There can be a conflict between those two. It's not, I think in my case, I followed those instructions literally: leave the old consciousness behind, and I focused on, becoming successful and etc. And I think that actually caused me a lot of work to do later on in order to integrate everything. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We all need to be able to do that. We've got a collection of selves, and we need to have them all in harmony with each other. So we need to keep our inner child happy, and we need to keep our young adult feeling confident and full of self-respect and so on.
But how do you reconcile the tendency and the strong urge towards instant gratification, which is the hallmark of the sacral chakra, the second chakra, the child, and the delayed gratification that's necessary for fulfillment on the third level? They seem to be in conflict. How do you reconcile that?
Well, the third chakra needs to have as part of its plan, because in some ways we write the jobs list in the third chakra. We sort of say, this is what I'm going to get through today. This is what I'm going to achieve. Mm-hmm. And on that list ought to be, I'm going to have some fun. Because if I don't have some fun, I'll end up being a misery and not being able to work anyway. So we just need to have a concept of ourselves as more whole, and needing to take care of these different aspects of ourselves, rather than dismissing our child. You're of no importance anymore. Go away. I can't possibly have fun. I've got far more important things to do. No, we've got to have a sense of ourselves needing to balance all these different aspects of ourselves.
It seems like somebody who grows up in a family system where they're burdened with a lot of responsibility from a very early age. Maybe they have many younger siblings, like I did. I was the oldest of 7. Maybe they had to take care of one of their parents, which was also somewhat true in my case.
Right. Yeah.
It's easy to feel guilty about having fun when you have too much responsibility too soon in your life.
I actually recognize that pattern physically in the body. I know just what you mean. And it usually means there's a complete break between the second and third chakras, which you can help to change with hands-on healing and build that flow. And at the same time, encourage people to start to embrace their inner child and not dismiss it. And that's where the heart chakra comes in, because the heart chakra is the compassionate witness that looks at our younger selves. We've got our inner animal, I call it, in the base chakra that's just keeping us alive. It's an instinctual energy. And then the pleasure-seeking, love-seeking child, and the self-respect, confidence-seeking young adult. And the heart chakra is the unconditional love that just accepts all these different parts of ourselves. And in accepting them and, you know, owning them all, letting them all be, healing happens. They all become recognized and accepted as part of our human tribe.
So they're not really organically in conflict with each other.
They needn't be.
Even if they
No.
have different priorities for the time being.
No, it's cultural messages that make us think that they are.
Right. So what are nadis? You describe these energy channels. I'd like to talk about that for a second and talk about the energy itself.
Okay, so the nadis, and actually there's not many people who write about the chakras who bring in the nadis, but it seemed really important to me. It's a Sanskrit word, and it means a stream of flowing water or stream of something flowing. Mm-hmm. And we see them as channels, and I'm just mentioning that flowingness of them because they are flowing channels. They can be linked to things like nerves and veins and arteries, but in the chakra system, they are linked to subtle energy channels, and they're all over the body. I mean, some people say that they're like acupuncture meridians. Maybe, maybe not. There's pictures of them where they're not only all over the body, they're all over the aura as well, these channels of energy. What we do to make it simpler with the chakras is we have a right channel and a left channel and a central channel. And the right channel represents all the right-hand side, the left, all the left-hand side. And these represent two very important aspects of the self. The right channel represents the autonomous, independent, individual self, and the left channel represents the relational, connected self. So traditionally, the right channel is considered the masculine channel, and it's the solar channel where we shine like a sun, and the left channel is the feminine channel, where the lunar channel, where we reflect the sun, where we are. And traditionally that would be the feminine. I tend not to use masculine and feminine now because we all have the solar and the lunar aspects. Balancing that part of us that's just an individual self and the relational connected self is a very important part of developing a contented psyche.
Yeah, it's almost taboo these days to use gender terms like masculine and feminine. But so how does acupuncture relate to these nadis?
Now I wouldn't know that. I'm sorry, that's out of my, it's just that I know other people who are acupuncturists who've said that's what they link to. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
More investigation needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that acupuncture has been around for so long, and I go to acupuncture every week. And I find it very helpful, but I can never explain to my rationalist friends how on earth it works. And it's amazing to me that after several thousand years, we still are not very good at measuring the energy that is flowing as a result of that. You call that prana or chi.
Yes, prana.
Chi, why can't we? You think we're ever going to be able to measure this and sort of scientifically prove that?
Well, we're getting progress because they now know that the heart chakra has a measurable electromagnetic field, and the magnetic field of the heart chakra, which can be measured up to 3 feet from the body. So if they can start to measure that, I think slowly we'll get to accept that we're a lot more than just a physical body. We're expanding out beyond, and our consciousness is expanding out beyond the body, which explains absent healing and all sorts of other things working in the aura. So yeah, I think it's a matter of time. I think there's got to be a big shift away from this idea that the body's a machine and the mind is all in the brain, because we're a lot more than that.
Now, what is the relationship between chakras and auras?
The chakras expand out from that. They're centered in the spine. They are the energy centers that run through the body. They actually are all at turning points in the spine, and apart from the crown chakra, which is in the head. And these energy, if you imagine them as lights, shining lights, so the base chakra is a red light, the sacral chakra is an orange light glowing from the center. That light glows out across the body and out into the aura. And the aura is made up of all these chakras glowing out from the center of the spine out into the aura. Our center is right at the core of our being. The aura is our reaching out into the universe.
Now we're getting to the solar plexus chakra, the third chakra, and then there's the fourth chakra. I love your book because it talks about all the chakras on all these different levels, and we can barely touch on this today in a half-hour show. The solar plexus chakra is, you say it would be one in which the inner critic and what you call the inner champion are in balance.
Yeah, ideally, that's what we need with it. You meet people very, very tight and tense in the solar plexus area, and it's often to do with them having a very fierce inner critic. That so I can ask them to go away and write down all the things they've done in their life that make them feel pleased about themselves, and then expand from that. What do you own? What do you own that you're really pleased about? Because this is all what you've achieved. And then, what personal qualities do you have that you feel really pleased about? Are you kind? Are you creative? Whatever they are. And so you build a picture, and that's your inner champion. You build a picture of yourself. And then you can have a conversation, if you want, with your inner critic. So you can take one of your inner champion statements and say, I'm actually very kind. And then the inner critic's likely to jump in and say, well, what about this time? and then you just decide you're going to carry on the conversation until that inner critic starts to calm down a bit and eventually becomes a critical friend rather than a harsh inner critic. So you're looking to bring those two in. That's how you build that self-esteem. We can't be just all in a champion, because actually there's somebody in the White House that's a bit like that, I would say. But we
not for long, we hope.
Anyway, but we can't be all in a critic as well. We have to have these two aspects of ourselves in balance.
Right. Why do you say the heart chakra is the game changer?
The heart chakra is our healer, and it heals all this woundedness. It helps bring all these things. It just compassionately accepts all the different aspects of ourselves and allows us to think, actually, we're okay. And as that happens, the heart chakra flows more strongly, it opens, and we have the chance to enter the spiritual level of ourselves. And as it opens, that means that the spiritual energy that's coming down through the crown chakra, down through the chakras, is greater. There's a stronger flow, and we have more inspiration, we have more creativity, the upper chakras get stronger and work better. All these things are a result of the heart chakra opening and strengthening. Well, it's open all the time. They all open in childhood, but becoming stronger, flowing more strongly, right, and being a bigger part of our psyche.
Yeah, it seems to me that the crux of the matter for humanity right now is moving from the third to the fourth chakra, from the solar plexus to the heart, because we're so stuck as humanity, so stuck on the lower three. So we need to bring more heart energy to it.
Absolutely.
And there's so much more that we could talk about. The The fifth, the throat chakra, which is about expression and presentation. And
Yes.
the eye chakra, which is about philosophical higher thinking. And then, of course, you have the crown chakra at the top, which is like cosmic consciousness. And
Yeah.
I want to mention the fact that you have sections on chakra therapy in the book, and we've got about 30 seconds, but can you
Okay.
speak to that?
Well, that's where I talk about case studies of how I've worked with somebody with a particular chakra problem. And then I also give exercises for nourishing each chakra. So every chakra gets exercises in that section. I think I've tried to do that quickly.
You know, I've used the chakras for meditation. I've meditated.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I go from, I sweep down, I actually do a sweeping technique with all 7 chakras that I'm imagining these energy centers spinning. Is that something you would recommend?
Yeah, that's fine. I do actually always start from the base chakra, because if people do too much top energy chakra, they can get very ungrounded. So I always start at the bottom, work my way up I work with those glowing lights, and then bring the white light of the universe down when I've got them all opened from the bottom upwards. So I work with the two. There are 2 flows. There's what we call the experiential flow and the spiritual flow downwards. Experiential flow upwards.
Well, I wish we had more time, but we don't. And so I want to thank you very much for being on the Pathways show today.
It's lovely to talk to you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And I want to be sure to tell our listeners about your website, which is glenpark.uk, GLENPARK.uk. And for those who may have tuned in to Pathways late today, this is your host, Paul O'Brien, author of Intuitive Intelligence, a book that shares the theme of Pathways, which is personal and cultural evolution. And don't worry, you can play or share this interview whenever you want via the internet or via free podcast, and I'll tell you how in a minute. Today, we've been visiting with Glen Park, author of Chakra Healing Therapy, Awaken Spiritual Energies and Heal Emotional Wounds, a profound book for our times. I want to say thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into Pathways, which is broadcast and streamed on the internet at www.kboo.fm every other Sunday morning at 8:30 USA Pacific Time. Even better, podcasts of today's show, which you can listen to and forward to others, are available for free at divination.com, spelled DIVI nation.com, as well as via iTunes and other podcast servers. And we have the archive of all the Pathways shows at divination.com. This is Paul O'Brien reminding you to tell your friends about Pathways Radio and podcasts. And thanks again to Glen Park and to all of you listeners for tuning in and being a part of the Pathways conversation.
Thank you, Paul.